Do you remember what it's like to be 13? Yeah, it sucks. When I was 13, I had braces, and I did not wash my hair often enough, and I wore graphic t-shirts, flare-leg jeans, and black leather boots every single day. Oh yeah, I was rocking it. Yeah. Guess which one's me? Yeah, pretty easy. I was a weird kid, and not just because I dressed like a one-woman grunge band. My interests were always a little bit out there. I listened to, guess who? The Beatles exclusively. You could guess by the t-shirt. I only read fantasy novels. I listened to all my music on vinyl or cassette, as all the cool kids do. Now, based on that, on my really great John Lennon impersonation, you might think I was unpopular. Well, I was, but I had absolutely no idea. I thought I was so cool. Even then, I did know I was different. I never quite fit in. All my friends were cool because they were quirky, but I was just weird. I didn't have a ton of friends. I had a small social circle, but no surprise, that was about it. It was at this already rough age that I was first diagnosed with depression. It was hard at the time to see what all the symptoms were, but in hindsight, it should have been clear. I was sleeping 12, 13 hours a night. I gained a ton of weight. Right before I was diagnosed, I started self-harming. No one else really understood what it meant to be depressed or to have depression. My friends were also 13, so they had just as much maturity as I did to handle the situation. And sure, I have my mom and my sister, and they've been awesome support, but it's different than friends. It's a different kind of support, and by the time I got to high school, I realized I didn't really have it. I spent all of high school wondering if I was the only person in the world who was going through this. The only times I did hear people discuss depression, they were talking about how it's totally not real and people who are depressed should just run more. Yeah, I never had the guts to tell those people off, which is what I should have done. So now I wasn't just the weird kid, I was the weird kid with a weird illness that people didn't even think was real. What do you do? What do you do when you have an illness that people don't understand and that's hard to explain? I hoped everything would change by the time I came to college, which was about 5 years after my first diagnosis. I left my home in Casper, Wyoming to come down here to attend UNC. I was so optimistic. But as you can suspect, it did not get suddenly magically easier because I lived in Greeley. That got a lot of laughs. Depression and introversion worked together to keep me in my dorm at all hours. I ate every meal alone. I slept a lot. My roommates weren't really around, and when they were, they didn't talk to me. I was always the last person in class to get a partner, even when I broke out of my comfort zone and said hello first. People were nice, sure, but nobody invited me to anything. I would never confess to it, but sometimes I would be going to the dining hall and I'd see everyone else in my major sitting down for lunch together, and as I'm taking my food to go, I would cry. Don't tell anyone I told you that. It's embarrassing. I had tried everything in my power not to be the weird kid. I left all my fantasy novels at home, and I didn't wear any graphic t-shirts, and I told everyone how much I love musical theater. What was the problem? It was beyond me. So, in all my alone time, I started writing. I'd always written casually before college, short story here and there, but I never took it all that seriously. But now I was fighting depression, and my support network, my mom, sister, and Even my high school friends were states away. I was growing increasingly isolated and more than once wondered if I should just switch majors or switch schools or drop out. Then I stumbled upon this website called Quora, where people post questions and other just average everyday folks give answers. I, being a lover of random trivia and fun facts, thought this was the dream. Except, what do I know? I almost failed high school chemistry. I can't tell the difference between Abe Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson. One has a hat. And, I thought square root was a gardening term. Once again, I was at the threshold of something awesome, and there was no place for me. Until I noticed a few questions about depression. Digging deeper, I saw there were hundreds of these questions, people asking, what are the symptoms, or how do I support someone who has depression, or what do I do if I have it? And the current answers to all of those questions were filled with the same terrible misinformation that I loathed. The just go for a run, or stop being so lazy, or that's a first world problem. I didn't know a lot, but I knew what it meant to be depressed. Half of me hoped that everything I'd been through could be helpful to someone else. So I shared everything I knew, what helped me, what made my depression worse, what my symptoms were. And then I dug deeper, how I felt, the isolation, the pain, the failures. I was painfully honest, sometimes to the point of regretting it now. I wrote with no shame about my situation, though I was ashamed, deeply ashamed that here I was, age 18, I'm at college, it's the time of my life, and I have no friends and I'm depressed. But something about the relative anonymity of the internet made me just spill it all. A couple answers here or there quickly spiraled into 3 or 4 hours a day of writing. It was all I wanted to do. I'd get out of class, go straight to my laptop, and get to work. It was the one place I could break down, unravel my growing despondence over being in college and being alone. Even for all of my honesty, I kept some barriers up. I didn't let the weird show. My prose was raw in many ways, but the quirks, the oddities of thought and speech, I kept those to myself. I didn't want everyone to know. Over the course of the year, I started gaining traction. I cracked 1,000 followers. A few months later, 5,000, then 10. People started mentioning me as a young writer to follow. All right. I got my first piece of fan mail, which was my name, like that. It's the thought that counts. People of all ages started messaging me, asking for advice on how to handle depression. Online was the one place I was a somebody. I had fans. I had a name. I was a brave warrior who broke down the stigma of depression, or something. But in real life, I was still a veritable nobody. People who read my work were messaging me, hoping to talk to the writer, the facade they saw online, but I never responded to their messages. I was scared. I didn't want to disappoint them or maybe reveal that I wasn't what I was saying I was. I was still just the weird kid. They wouldn't want to know me. I held on to that belief for a long time. Another year went by, and suddenly I had friends. Sometimes we'd go out so often that I'd forget to write for days. I shared so much with my new friends, and they were so awesome, but the one thing I kept to myself was the depression. So in that way, I was still alone. So now there was this division, the brave depression warrior I was online, and the weird kid I was in real life. So no matter where I was, I never felt like I was really me. One day the question, what is depression, came through my Quora feed. It's kind of a vague, super simple question. You can give an answer out of a can, like, depression is a mental illness caused by blah, 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 whatever. But come on, Google can do that. Like, I was going to do one better. So I thought about it, and I remembered that a few years back, my sister and I named my depression, which is kind of a weird thing to do. We called him Sam, which my sister said stood for sad and mopey. It was stupid, but it gave me an idea. What if depression was like your roommate? I wrote that depression was a man named Sam who broke into my house and refused to leave. He trashed my stuff, would hurl abuses at me day and night, tried to break down my self-esteem. He'd make me late for work, and when I told my boss it wasn't my fault, it was Sam's, my boss would say, well, I don't believe in that Sam guy anyway, which made me alone. And if I couldn't afford to have Sam taken away, I had to fight him all on my own. I ended it with a comparison to my own life, how I viewed depression as something outside of myself. So I could say, I have depression, and not, I am depressed. Because it's way easier to get rid of things you have than things that you are. I thought the whole idea was kind of stupid, to be honest. Even trying to explain the concept to people gets weird. So depression's a guy who sleeps on your couch. It's one of those weird things you think, but you really don't tell people. I wrote the whole thing, and then I almost deleted it. But I figured I'd put in all the hours, so I took a deep breath and clicked post. Within a day, it had over 1,000 likes. Comments poured in. I never thought of it that way. Thank you. My son has depression, and now I understand what it's like. I named my depression Janice. Screw you, Janice. I didn't get it. It was such a ridiculous story, but somehow it was resonating with people. No one told me it was stupid or nonsensical or weird. No one said weird. They said that they liked it, that they liked how unique it was, that they liked me. For the first time, I wondered if being the weird kid wasn't such a bad thing after all. Seeing things differently, living a little differently, might not make you popular, but it gives you something else. Different perspective. That post now has over 13,000 likes and was republished in The Mighty, which is a publication for mental health stories. I've since written dozens of other stories in that same odd, weird style, and they've gotten way more likes than the pieces where I tried to be something I'm not. Gotten pretty comfortable with being the weird kid, because it means I can tell stories that no one else would. I've stopped trying to say what people want me to say or hide the parts of me that are completely bizarre. So now, I proudly listen to the Beatles way too often, and I do puzzles that look like dragons, and I wear over-the-top cat-eye glasses. And when people call me weird, I say, thank you, because there's no shame in being weird. There's no shame in being you. Embrace the weird kid inside of you. You just might find that everyone will embrace you right back.